This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, Joey asks me about innumeracy. Woo!
Insert a math rock song. This is what a Joey sounds like. And this is what an executive producer and numerator Jess Vander sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess.
You're a numerator.
Versus
Would you prefer to be a
denominator?
denominator?
I don't think so.
No?
I think numerator versus denominator always wins. Because
enough.
she comes out on top.
Oh, wow.
True.
Wow. All right. Well, flexing with the maths. Jess, I don't want to clean the house. I don't feel like it today. So
Just leave it a mess.
Yeah.
Leave it a mess.
I've seen a bunch of discussions recently on the interwebs across a few different places. I've seen it in like Twitter and Reddit and I think I might have even heard a podcast reference the conversation. It's just been in the ether.
It's around. It's floating.
To be fair, I'm always like a little skeptical of these discussions around like IQ and population level understandings of things for like potentially being sort of like insidious like eugenics types of traps, but I haven't.
Whoa, like people suggesting that our whole population is becoming dumber.
Well, yeah, never that. It's like, well, so the conversations have been around sort of the ability of the general public to be able to interpret charts and graphs, and like how many people in a population can answer the ability to interpret a specific graph. And there are like different questions that get asked. And like the general conversation is basically that, you know, a large swath of the population, while not necessarily innumerate, is not equipped to be able to like intake graphical based mathematical knowledge in some capacity. And it's got me thinking a lot about both sort of conversations that we've touched on in the past and have been quite big in recent moments. You know, a few months ago, there was a big conversation around the return to phonics having gotten away. Like the Daily had done a big piece. There were several like longer form articles written about, you know, a well-intentioned teacher pushing away from phonics and using sight words and storytelling as a way to teach reading. But in fact, people were not able to read as well. Now
they can't read. Yeah.
Yeah. And it made me think about what is the equivalent when it comes to math. I think broadly speaking, culturally, there is a lot. You don't hear people being like, oh, I can't read or I don't do reading, but you will hear people be like, I can't do math or I don't do math or like, oh, it's math. In the same way, even like in programs that hold math, people will like wholesale be like, I don't touch Excel. Yeah. Like, and for sure, like it's not like a joyful experience necessarily, but oftentimes is the best tool for particular jobs. And people are like, I'll do it in Word or I'll do, you know, like whatever. And so I was curious to ask you, how do we do math learning better?
It's wild to think that being good with numbers has this sort of inherent intellectual tether in a way that being good with words is supposed to be, you know, more approachable. Like math is hard, reading is soft. Yeah. And yet what I'm hearing you talk about is like charts and graphs, like numbers, things that are inherently visual, you'd think would be a softer concept, yet in many ways I can very, very much personally relate to the idea of not only being uncomfortable personally with math, it's never been my strong suit relative to reading and writing, just to ask my SAT score readers, but why it is that, at least in this country, that it has become almost socially more acceptable. And what does that mean then? Does it mean that we are trying less hard at figuring out how to teach people how to read charts.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Probably, like the answer is yes. Like, and I think it feels like, and I don't know if this is true, there has been a lot of evolution in sort of the pedagogy around teaching math. I know most of us adults now going into like low level math learning would not recognize. Like there's a lot written about parents sort of seeing their like third grader learning sort of basic math concepts, like not even getting to the point where you're like getting back into algebra and things. And you're like, I don't remember how to do graph theory or something, being like, wait, you're doing long division how?
Yeah, it's so different now. Like the way you're taught to do mental math or simple arithmetic, there are different structures and methods being taught in schools. And I'm like, man, maybe I should try that myself as an adult person, because whatever system, like you said, in the same way that phonics turns out is actually the move.
Yeah.
Like the equivalent, the actual name escapes me, but like the equivalent method of like rounding math.
Yeah.
Like that makes way more sense. Do that.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is like math, I think, is often taught as abstraction, right? So even if you were talking about before, right, like math is hard, like it is discrete in most cases, unless you're going into like non-discrete, like sort of advanced geometries or number theory or things like that. But like outside of that, most of the math that anyone would get to in like a normal math education that's not specializing in advanced physics or specifically mathematics or something like that is like, broadly speaking, discrete. Even if you're going into like thermodynamics or like fluid mechanics or something, it's still discrete. But we teach it as abstraction so that you can understand the concepts. And I think that for me is like always a problem. Like going through algebra or algebra 2 or trigonometry or things like that was always like, why? When will I need this? Like, I don't understand the utility. And like, how often have you heard that question?
Right. Versus like tipping and doing your taxes. Like that would be real helpful as just some of the more entry level mathematic concept learning context.
Yeah. And like, even if the concepts that you are learning were made more utile, I guess. Like, even if you would probably not run into the utilization of those things unless you were pursuing one of the, like, I remember watching a physics video about satellite or about telescopes and how to like build like world-sized telescopes and how they figure out like distance through triangulation and all of these concepts. And I was like, oh, that's the usefulness of like the geometry that I learned, 2 decades ago or something like that. Which is
why it's super awesome when for, combo physics and math class, they take you to the roller coaster theme park. Like, yeah, let's fill out the packet and figure out your potential energy at the top of Bear Mountain or whatever the thing is. Yeah, I feel like that is super cool. I also, there's something about the what context do not get very quickly mired in industry with numbers, like quickly with the financial things. You start like you inevitably run into like, okay, well, you have to understand how interest works, or like to get into any math in terms of economics. It's like, well, okay, now I have to explain to you this other stuff. Or like in politics, it's like, well, okay, here are some of the factors that go into this versus like the elemental version of reading.
Yeah.
It can be context independent.
Yeah.
Like, or story independent, right?
Yeah. I mean, there have been some great educators through time that I think help with some of those things by like making things feel sort of understandable, if not in in this like specific way, at least through like metaphor or analog, right? Like Carl Sagan is a good example of that. You know, there's like the 10x video, I think is what it's called, or something to that effect, and it like starts with this image of like a couple having a picnic in like Millennium Park in Chicago or something, and it starts showing you what orders of magnitude does. Like, okay,
to
go
zoom
out. Yeah, to zoom out by 10 and 10 and 10 and 10 and 10, and like how quickly you get to like galactic level view, and then sort of go in the reverse back through and into like microscopic level view. Like the interesting part in some of those conversations is that we actually like sit in the middle, right? Like the Planck scale to the universe scale, like humans are actually like right in the middle of size.
Yeah.
But at least allows you to understand it, because then if you can understand the concept of orders of magnitude, then you can understand the impact, like the scale of monetary power that a billionaire has, right? Because like $1 billion versus $1 million is like wild different versus
much more. Actually, turns out lots more. Yeah, and this is also maybe tethered to the point that like you think that one number might be a persuasive way to make a case to somebody about something, and it's like people have no sense of that thing. Like I think Ryan had brought up to me this like conversational trivia question of like, is present day is the, I think it's something like, is the reign of Cleopatra closer to present day or the construction of the pyramids? And people are like, I can't tell you that.
Cleopatra, I think.
Wait, no, is the reign?
Oh.
Or wait, no, I'm botching the question.
Are we closer to Cleopatra, or was she closer to the construction of the pyramids?
See, now look, please hold, everyone.
I think I know it. Yeah, like which is further from Cleopatra, present day, or the construction of the pyramids?
Yes. And then it's like,
we're closer to Cleopatra than she was to the pyramids, right?
Cleopatra lived about 2,000 years before our time. The pyramids were built about 2,500 years before Cleopatra's time.
Yeah. I mean, I think we ran into this in conversations early on in the pandemic of like, and you know, like, here's the thing is sometimes the people who are like hypernumerate are not helping the case to make others hypernumerate. They're like, the average person doesn't understand exponential growth. And it's like, yeah, fair. But like, that's not helping the case to explain exponential growth to people like in, you know, they're like founders of startups understand exponential growth because we're focused on growing our startups and like increasing user growth and whatever. We're looking for that hockey stick. So we get it. But like lay people don't get how this pandemic is going to show exponential growth. Like this sort of like, you know, actually type of conversation that you would be annoyed to hear in public. And while like they're not wrong, as maybe sometimes the people who are prone to say actually are also not wrong, it is like a message that is hard to receive. And I don't know if it is because the conversation we sort of have on a cultural level about numeracy and the value of numeracy is different than we have about the value of literacy.
I feel like the concept of math seems like it is only required for a select intellectual few, when practically speaking, you also could, that's helpful for most people to have like simple amounts of math. Like the high level amounts of math, yes, true, but same with like high level amounts of what would reading be? Like, would that be poetry? That's actually taking me too far. What is like the highest note you'd hit to reading scientific papers?
I mean, I get like that's like technical reading, right? Yeah. But like also there's sort of, I don't know, like philosophical literature is like quite dense because it's, right? I mean, philosophical literature is like interesting in that it can like combine logic, which is thought of more in mathematical terms, with language and sort of verbal expression to construct logic, which is like, that's kind of like the intersection maybe.
You know what it is? I think it's that math lives much closer to the sushi spectrum or the sushi quality gradient. So if you were to speaking of a chart, imagine there's a chart and there's like a price to quality axis on this chart. Sushi.
The y is price and the x is quality type of.
Yes,
got it.
And it's like, okay, so let's just think about it, right? Like even your run of the mill sushi, it's like to get from the grocery store. If you're a sushi person, like you still might be able to enjoy your grocery store sushi.
Bad pizza.
Right? Yes. Versus the other end of the spectrum, like truly earth-shattering quality of sushi is on another level and is noticeably and discernibly better.
Yeah.
But there's like a really decent chunk of like, hey, you don't need a whole lot to take you to a pretty good place.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's how I feel that math should be. When in fact it seems like it's being treated more like, what's a food that's like barely even approachable unless it's really good? Like you don't mess around with blank unless it's good.
I had this conversation recently, and now I'm like trying to like that. There's no middle. It's either like awful or like transcendental.
Now I'm like choosing something bougie, but like people think math is like tartar. Like you don't go for, and this is funny because it's also a raw fish thing, but it's like
or raw beef.
Or right, okay, right. But you don't mess around with that unless it's from a notable and noble source.
Yeah, like that. There's danger until a certain, like you can. I don't know. I think it's also because if you're taught poorly early on, if you lay a poor foundation with math, then it can be just consistently demoralizing.
Yeah, you have a sick experience with that sushi.
Yeah,
you're not going to try it again.
Because obviously you interact with mathematical concepts whether or not you expressly think about them in those terms on a daily basis.
Right.
But you also, like us having a conversation is clearly, a verbal mechanism. We are using language to communicate with one another, and so you can understand the value of being able to improve your ability to communicate, or you will need to read something out in public and that will have some value. Whereas math tends to not necessarily express itself explicitly in every instance where you need to do it. Like, how far away is that thing? Or like, if I leave at this time, how long will it take me to get there? Like, those are all sort of like mathematical questions that you will ask yourself on a daily basis, but you're not saying like, I'm doing math.
Yeah. And
right?
How often are you actually experiencing positively reinforcing social interactions versus figuring out how long it's going to take you to get to a place, or doing, investing your money, or like other things that are maybe stressful contexts for people? It's like, that's a different, then you're just reinforcing like, anytime you do math, the pressure's on, baby.
Yeah. We will be grading it. Yeah.
Right.
Like someone's going to come in with like a red X when you like evaluate how long of a run you went on or something like that. I don't know.
How do we create more? Well, I don't know the answer, and I'm curious now to roam Google to figure out what solutions to making math less intimidating are. But I wonder how we can socially destigmatize, or maybe what's the opposite of making it okay? Can you make it not okay to not math? What's that? No, come on, math is cool, or not knowing math is not cool.
I mean, I think it's one of those things where like math provides you with a lot of agency, not even necessarily if you know all of the concepts you would ever need to know, but if you build enough of a foundation to be able to understand new concepts when you encounter them, right? Like compound interest or something like that. Compound interest will be relevant to anyone who has a retirement fund or who is saving for some reason in their life. Has to take out a mortgage or any of those things. So like the ability to enter into that conversation and make sense of it is valuable. It gives you agency, it gives you control and the ability to make decisions. But I don't think math is typically taught in that way. It tends, at least maybe I'm speaking too much to my own experience, is like a cudgel. It's like, hey, dum-dum, do these problems and then go on with your life. And so like often I've seen people I would consider like intelligent people encounter like a math challenge in their life, not thinking about it as a math challenge, and then being like, oh wait, I actually do know how to do that thing. Right. It is so abstracted that like there's no utility, even though you like got taught this thing, you just never realized.
You didn't associate the two things. Yeah, totally. You know what else? It reminds me, if you recall, cultural astrologer Osei Kwache taught me a thing or two about the way math and money appear in pop culture, and poring over song lyrics like in Jay-Z's 444 about like teaching some like pretty actually strong investment advice through rap. It's like, oh yeah, this is a beautiful thing to do, to try to make these concepts more approachable, even if it's coming from a place you least expect. It seems like the canvas is pretty carte blanche to to start thinking more creatively about how to get people excited or unintimidated.
Yeah. Like for sure, there are like these types of math questions that could be relevant to everyone's everyday, that like the expectation is not that most people will get it, like the Monty Hall problem or something like that, which is like, I have gone into that question, got to the point where I'm like, okay, I understand what's happening, and then leave, and I'm like, great, the Monty Hall problem is like now out of my head again, and until I get back there. I don't apply that to
like
things. Why should I open the third door?
Like goats and cars. Like I think that's the one with the car. It's like I just know I'm supposed to keep opening doors.
Yeah, just open the third door. That's what you're supposed to do. So I'll just do it, and I'm going to move on. Yeah. But I also, there are other aspects of my life where I'm like walking down the street with like friends or my family, and I'm like what I'm like game theorying my walk, because I'm trying to like leave the most options open for if I hit like a you can't walk sign, to be able to just continue walking to my path.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, there's a probability tree and I can go all of these paths, but like what will leave the most paths open? And my wife's like, why are you walking this way? And I'm just like, because it will get us there the fastest. And she's like, okay, like sure.
Then we will never have to stop walking.
Yeah, we will just keep walking. I'm leaving left and right always open. But yeah, I guess at the end of the day, we should probably find a way
to
make math less abstract and more discrete, at least to a certain, like obviously there are points like starting to talk about infinities and calculus and things like that. But like people may be more compelled by those things had they like not had an aversion for 12 years prior to achieving that point in their mathematical careers. So
as a self-identifying near enumerate, I put me on the subscriber list. Sign me up for that newsletter.
Yeah.
Put me on. I'm ready to solve this problem because I could use it.
I just think there's like so many implications, right? Like if people are not able to read graph, or like 50% of the population or something is not able to read like relatively like simple graphical representations of population dynamics, of like this is how this thing will impact a group of people based on this policy. Like it has impact on like the state of our civic environment, right? To be able to say like, here's some economic information represented in the graph, and like you have to go out and vote. Like that is why we believe in democracy. So I think we would probably all benefit if we could get better at this. I don't have the answer, but it's just been now like a thing on my mind of like, should I be doing something different with my daughter? Or like, how do I approach sharing information differently through work or like public communications or things like that. If graphical representations are hard,
Yeah, let's institute the XKCD index. It's like the Waffle House index, but do you get the jokes on XKCD?
Sometimes.
Because if you don't, you might need to do some maths.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. You want to hit us with your math up corner?
Wow. Yeah. For those of you like me, when you look at dates written in numbers and you're like, is that the month? What is that?
Or is this person from Europe or are they
November 12th? Like if the day were over 12, this would be much more straightforward, but I'm not even sure. And what part of the world am I in? I feel you. I'm here with you. I'm one of you. And I think we must call upon both education, those educators who know better than us, but also ourselves to do some problem solving and figure out how to make math both not so hard to learn and not so easy to hate.
Simple as that. More Mr. Wizards, Bill Nyes, Carl Sagans, and other joyful educators.
Bluey, if you want to do a spin-off math series for the children, that would be just
Bluey. No. The Dunny. Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by Numbers Are Cool, and it's a cool number song. That's 10.
As always, we'd like to thank our executive producer and long division, Jess Vander.
No. We'd like to thank sound engineer and the code cracking, number crunching Alex Contel.
We'd like to thank our programming coordinator and man who knows that the limit does not exist, Les Jacobs.
And thanks to our production crew and also the numerators. The numerators. That's it. Sarah Gilbert, Nora Masteridge, Christy Jensen, and Amy Waters.
And as always, thanks, Ellen.
Thank you.
Special thanks. I mean, Beekman's Laboratory, Mr. Wizard, Bill Nye, like all those folks who made science feel fun when I was a little kid. Even though I guess I never really pursued science, it's expanded my worldview and is something I can find a lot of joy in everyday life by just understanding things around me. So thanks.
And thanks for the M in STEM.
Yeah.
Or STEAM.
And thanks for the A in STEAM too.
You know what? That's great. Yeah.
Also, no thanks to my sister, Jessica, who would, whenever I would say something related to science when I was young, 12 to 17, she would just go, Bill, 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 from the Bill Nye the Science Guy theme song. And I would just be like, shut up, Jessica. I'm just trying to understand.
I just want to know.
Orbital mechanics.
Yeah. And thanks to my brother and my dad for trying their hardest. Sorry that I tried. I'm still working on adding, still working on subtracting, and that's it.
Well, we did it. Love you, mean it. Bye.